Well, look, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce skills webinar in conjunction with our fabulous partners, BMET College. So skills and the skills gap are one of those topics that seems to get discussed an awful lot. And I think even more so during the coronavirus pandemic, as people are starting to think about how we go about recovering, where the jobs of the future are going to be and what skills are going to be needed in the post-coronavirus future. I think often the discussions are quite one way. They involve businesses, they involve educators, but they don't often involve young people who are going through education, trying to get their perspective. So this morning, the Chamber and BMET thought that we'd change the conversation on skills, just as the title says there on the screen. And we're going to hear from a range of students this morning at different points in their educational journey. We want to hear about their experiences of education and trying to find work, and particularly how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted on them, and also hear a little bit about what's worked well and what they want from businesses, so we can really start to get some conversation flowing about how we do genuinely close that skills gap and get into action rather than just talking about it. So we want this to be very interactive, so it will be open for questions, and we want everyone who's listening in to participate. I'm just going to flick over to the agenda, and very shortly we'll be hearing from Susie Branch-Haddow, the Director of Employer Engagement at BMET, to set the scene for us. And then we're going to go over to our panellists. I'm delighted we've got 5 of them with us today. You can see names up on the screen there: Laura, Gwyneth, Gabriel, Millie and Cameron. And as I say, they're going to introduce themselves and tell us about where they're at on their journey and initial thoughts. And we'll go over to questions. So please do get those questions coming in the chat. And I promise you that we will be done just before 10 o'clock, so everyone can zoom off to their next meeting or whatever you have planned for the rest of the day. Now, just before we get started, quick couple of plugs on behalf of the Chambers. A couple of big things going on in the world right now, obviously the coronavirus pandemic and also Brexit. So we could just flick on to the next slide, please. That would be great. And if you are interested in finding out more on either of those topics, then we've got 2 great events coming up in the next week. On Thursday morning, we have our quarterly business report taking place online at 8 o'clock in the morning, where we're going to give a summary on the state of our regional economy. And we're also going to be hearing from Dr. Justin Varney, the Director of Public Health here in Birmingham, who'll be updating on all things COVID and what we may be expecting from the various restrictions in the future, hopefully dropping down tiers, and what the vaccine means for us all in the brighter future in 2021. And then Brexit. If you want to know more about Brexit, then join us next week on the 15th of December. We're going to have a sort of drop-in session, and we'll be updating on what we will have learned this week, hopefully with the deal coming later in the week, fingers crossed, and again, how that might be impacting business in 2021. So a couple of events there, but what I'm now going to do is to hand over to Susie, who's going to give us an update from BMET, some work they've been doing recently, and just set the scene before we get into speaking to our panelists. So Susie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and good morning to everybody this morning. I'm just going to take around about 8 to 10 minutes to do some scene setting, as Paul has said. And I'm absolutely over the moon that we've been able to all come together to run this session today. As someone who's spent the best part of 7 years working within the skills sector across our city, I am aware of the privileged seat that I have of attending a lot of events to discuss skills. And it has started to feel to me that sometimes a massive part of the conversation isn't always around that table with us, and that part of the conversation being the young people in our region. So I'm delighted that with my fellow colleagues and students at BMET today, we're able to come together and have this conversation. To just do a bit of scene setting to get to explain really the inspiration of today. Ourselves at BMET, along with our colleagues at Youth Focus Midlands, came together a couple of months ago with the fantastic agency that is Beat Freaks to dig the data and to look at the effect of COVID on young people across the West Midlands. Now, this was following on from some work that Beat Freaks did earlier in the year, where they looked at the effect of COVID on young people across the whole of the UK. We came together to say, could we dig the data and have a look at the impact of COVID on the West Midlands to get that real regional picture? So after today's session, I will ensure that everybody who's attended is able to have a link to the report. I think if you've joined us this morning, it is the type of report that you will find of real interest. And it covers quite a lot of things, from the effect on relationships, mental health, how young people have digested the news, how they feel the media has behaved during this whole crisis. But today I wanted to just focus a little bit in my welcome on the effect of on young people, particularly around the economy and their careers and education. There's a whole sort of chapter on that in the report. So, sounding like one of the politicians, please could I have the next slide? Thank you, Sophie. So just I think this slide's important just to sort of contextualise here. And this only takes us up to September, but when we helicopter out, this is the time frame that we've all been subject to this year, including young people in our region. So the first case of coronavirus came in January the 29th. By the 23rd of March, it had been the last day in school, university, and in office work, and we were in full lockdown. That's one hell of a pace that we moved at. And as we continued through up until September, there were other bumps and bounces that we all went through. And of course, those bumps and bounces have continued since September. And I just find that a real helpful slide when we're talking about looking at the impact of coronavirus. Next slide, please, Sophie. The next couple of slides I just wanted to take us through again for scene setting. When we think about the impact of the last few months on young people, we do need to, I feel, take a step back and look at some of the headlines that have put a collective noun, I suppose, around the behaviour of young people in our country. And as you can see on a couple of slides here, headlines quite early days, blaming young people and saying that there was low compliance from young people as a group around lockdown, again, to be disputed. But next slide, please, Sophie. We carry that on, and of course, in the summer, as we all know, there was the bouncing around of A-level and GCSE results and the U-turns or not to U-turn. And I'll come back to this at the end of my slot. But I think it's important to remember here, and probably try and cast your own minds back to that transitional stage that you're going through as a young person at GCSE and A-levels. That's a really significant stage of your life. And then if you've got a whole layer of COVID on top, that's really unnerving and can cause huge anxiety. But then on top of that, the uncertainty that was brought not only from the U-turns, but also from some of the headlines that we can see there today. Next slide, please, Sophie. And it continued, you know, in the latter part of lockdown, we quite often heard young people are to actually blame for the second surge in COVID-19 cases. So I just wanted to contextualize some of those and share some of those headlines with you to just whilst we're focusing on the views of young people, to see some of the landscape that perhaps young people have been working against or with. Next slide, please. When we also look at the impact of COVID and we talk about our region, I think that the next three slides are really important. So we know from our research, but from other research going on, that young people have been hardest hit by the pandemic. And what we've got to remember in the West Midlands is that that is in the region which houses the youngest city in Europe. Next slide, please, Sophie. We also know that young people are most affected by financially and in their careers by COVID. And that's in the region where youth unemployment is above average and where poorer children are twice as likely to end up jobless. Next slide, please, Sophie. And we also know that people from BAME backgrounds have been disproportionately affected. And that's in the region where we've the highest number of residents of BAME backgrounds outside of London. So regionally, and the effect on our young people, this is quite a significant picture. Next slide, please, Sophie. And the three top worries that come out in the report for our young people who were interviewed were people close to me who are at risk, strain on the NHS, and the economic crisis. And the economic crisis connected to careers. Next slide, please. But I really wanted to focus on some positivity as well. And this slide, and then the next few slides that we're going to look at, really have shone out for me in the report. There was a question about, are you doing more to help those in need? And 62% of people, young people interviewed in the West Midlands said yes. And what this begins to show to me is that we've got not only a very resilient set of young people coming through, but we've got a very social responsible set of young people coming through our region. And when we look at some of the quotes, and Sophie, if you could just move over to the next slide. When we look at some of the quotes shared by some of the people interviewed, so here we have an 18-year-old female from Tamworth, signed up to be an NHS responder, helping people with their mental health, survival guide, and a food bank volunteer. And the next three slides, which Sophie, please do just go through whilst I'm talking, really do continue on this theme of helping others, of being resilient, of looking out for other people, of showing strong empathy skills. And even when we come to one of the last slides, last quote in particular, just after this one, of trying to look at technology-led solutions. That's fine, Sophie, if we could just pause there, thank you. And what a lot of the comments that I've started to see and some of the information come through in this particular bit of the report and other conversations I'm having with young people are starting to show to me is that we've got a set of young people coming through COVID who are socially responsible and demonstrating skills such as resilience, such as teamworking, such as empathy skills, all those sort of communication skills, all those sorts of skills that we as employers over years and years and years have been asking to see more young people demonstrate when they're looking for work with us and demonstrate in their interview process or in their CV and applications. And I think it's fascinating that we are seeing that set of skills come through as a natural trait. And probably one of the things we need to look at is how we can come together more as education and business to help young people understand the importance of translating the volunteering experience that they've developed through COVID into CVs and applications when the time is right. So just to finish on the last slide, if that would be okay, Sophie, before I hand over to the panel. Oh, right, it's my fault. It's not zoomed out particularly well. But just to be able to talk you through, I can talk you through the slide and I can share the slides as well afterwards. But the red bars where we can see the peaks are at age groups of students around about 15 to 17, around about sort of 21 to 22 and 24 to 25. In other words, coming back to when we looked at the media headlines, we're seeing more young people are more worried in the age group when they're at a transitional stage. So when they're looking at moving from GCSEs to A-level or from school into college or into university or onto an apprenticeship program or leaving and graduating university, all those transitional periods are where we're seeing uncertainty have a bigger impact a bigger impact on young people. And that's completely understandable. As I say, I think if we cast our own minds back to how we might have felt at those different periods of time, and indeed many in the audience might have children who are going through those same periods of transition. So what we really wanted to do today was to put some questions to our panel, to hear how things have been for them, to look at areas that they think that we might be able to improve on as the business community, and to take it from there. So at that point, I will hand back over to Paul. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Susie, and thanks for that sort of scene setting and the context there, which I think is really useful ahead of the sort of conversation now. Thanks also to Beat Freaks, obviously, for their work on the report, and as you said, absolutely brilliant organisation there. So, right, well, let's get stuck in now and move over to the panel. I think, you know, as a starter, we'll work around our room here, so we'll kind of come to everybody, and maybe to kick things off, just introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about where you're at in your sort of journey right now, be it education or your sort of career, and maybe just a few thoughts on how the pandemic's impacted you, both in work or in sort of going through those sort of 9 or 10 months that Susie outlined on the screen, and challenges that may have created. So, Laura, I was going to start with you, if that's okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hi, I'm Laura. I'm an apprentice at West Midlands Trains. I'm in my second year, studying at BMET, doing like a rail engineering qualification. And I'm really grateful to obviously have the apprenticeship in these times.
And how have things been sort of different over the past sort of 8 or 9 months? Has it changed much? Have you seen a lot of differences than sort of pre-March?
Yeah, I mean, obviously because of COVID and lockdown, we had to do a lot of our learning online and at home. So we missed out in many ways, because obviously it's a very hands-on apprenticeship normally. And we've had to kind of like adapt to working at home and like figuring out how trains work at home. So it has been a little bit different, definitely.
Obviously,
but it's worked.
It's worked, yeah. And I mean, rail engineering is so going to be so important here in the West Midlands, certainly with all that's going on, and in particular HS2 being HQ'd here, the sort of the heart of the new rail network. But thanks, Laura. So I was just going to move around the screen and come to Gwen next. So Gwen, over to you.
Hello, I'm Gwen. I am doing I'm in the second year of my legal studies HND at the moment with BMET. And
how's the sort of coronavirus situation impacted your studies then?
I think especially last year when everything was in full lockdown, it was difficult to do because everything was moved online. I'm really grateful for BMET actually, because the transition that we had from in-person learning to online learning has been relatively smooth. However, it is difficult, especially when it came to assessments and the whole issue of exams and things like that, of what they were going to do with it. It was, I think, a little bit nerve-wracking for myself and my peers, because we didn't exactly know whether we had exams or whether everything was just going to be coursework, or how the transition was going to work that way. It took, I think, a little bit of a while for everything to be sorted out, which was a little bit of a nervous kind of period.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a stressful time, isn't it? Trying to prepare anyway, or do your sort of cramming, and if you don't know exactly what's going to be happening or when, how do you sort of pace yourself? How do they all go in the end, the exams?
With the exams, in the end, I think we decided for our course anyway, we decided that it was going to switch to the coursework was going to be a lot more heavily weighted.
Yeah.
And then there was, for one of my modules, I think one of the exams actually just changed to a coursework kind of style, which personally worked out better in my favour, but a couple of my peers weren't exactly too happy about it. But yeah, it was one of those things really that we just had to kind of get on with.
Yeah, no, but incredibly unsettling, isn't it? And sort of
definitely. And the staff at BMET, I think, over summer have worked so hard for them to work things out this year to make things a lot smoother for us this year.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gwen. And just everyone watching, just cast your mind back to the last academic exam that you did, be it at college or school or university, and just think of the nerves going in to sort of sit there. And imagine if you didn't know exactly what was going on. It really sort of maybe helps to sort of bring home just how challenging that is. I've got butterflies in my stomach just thinking about mine now. Gabriel, tell us what you're up to at the moment, and similar sort of question really, how you've had to adapt or come through the past sort of period.
Yeah, so obviously I'm Gabriel. I'm doing my A-levels. I'm doing politics, religion, and media studies, which, you know, the lockdown affected us quite a bit, just because like we were all sort of in this limbo, and still now we don't know exactly if we're going to do our exams or how they're going to work and stuff. So it's changed everything quite a lot because we're in a lot less as well. We're in like once a week per subject for like 2 hours. So a lot more of our work, as I'm sure it is with everyone, is more online, which it's interesting to say the least. And yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world though, you know, especially if we get our predicted grades instead of doing
So
exams.
you're halfway through. This is your final year now.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, second year.
Yeah. And like Gwen, then, I mean, how was the spring? And you know, you're sort of coming up to the end of the first year, and you know, were you meant to be sitting in mocks or exams, or sort of, you know, did that? How were you sort of communicated with? How did you feel about all of that?
Yeah, we were meant to be doing our AS exams, and personally, I wasn't too bothered about doing them, and I wasn't too bothered really when they were cancelled, because it was like, oh well, I'm sure the college will do something, and obviously we all got switched to linear instead of ASAL, which in some ways works a lot better. So yeah, it's the spring was a shock, but like it wasn't, if that makes sense. We all knew they were going to close. We just didn't know how soon it was going to be.
Yeah. And just sort of looking ahead, Gabriel, I mean, in terms of what you're going to do next, have you got your plans in place, as much as you can do? You sort of mentioned there about what's going to happen with exams next spring, and you know, be it actually sit them or just get predicted grades.
Yeah, we from what we know so far, we're going to be doing like a slightly easier version of the exams, and then hopefully it's off to university and that to do like some religion and politics.
Good. Well, look, it's certainly from a politics point of view, it's a fascinating period to be living through.
Yeah.
So there's plenty to be talking about on that. Going to just move around to Millie next. So Millie, introduce yourself to everybody and just tell us what you're doing at the moment.
Yes, I'm Millie. I'm in the first year of studying at BMet. I'm studying level 3 diploma in engineering. And yeah, it's going well.
So you've just started then in September?
Yeah, I started in September. So yeah, I don't think I saw as much of like the change and the impact with Corona as everyone else, because they obviously were in the second year and they've had their, you know, first year learning, you know, as normal, I guess. But yeah, so I just switched straight on to, you know, only going in once every 2 weeks, well, 3 times every 2 weeks. And majority of it was all online. But yeah, no, BMet have been a good help in regards to, you know, giving us the support when you are at home and we do need those questions, no answers.
So you haven't known any different in terms of BMet, but I mean, how has it matched up to your expectations then? You know, is it what you thought college would be like, or I guess in many ways, obviously it isn't, but have you sort of felt like you're missing out on some of the sort of social interaction, and which is such an important part of any educational sort of course, isn't it?
Yeah, not so much to be fair, but I think, I don't know, and I can kind of live without the social aspect, although it is like an important part. But in regards to like expectation of like engineering, I think engineering is like a hands-on kind of subject. Well, any subject really in this field is like hands-on subject. It would be nice to actually have the full experience and actually go in and, you know, kind of visually learn instead of being online. But I guess it's okay.
So similar to sort of Laura's experience, where again it's very
Yeah.
sort of practical, but right
Yeah.
now we're having to make do. And then last but certainly by no means least, going to come to Cameron. So Cameron, I know you're working at the wonderful BNP Paribas, aren't you, at the moment? Just tell us about your situation and again, you know, how the pandemic's impacted yourself and work.
In terms of work, I think the biggest aspect is not being in the office. I think a lot of people within the industry feed off of energy, the fast pacedness of being in the office and just being able to run to someone and get a job done. So it has caused complications and we have had to adapt. But at the same time, I think that it's a new environment to try and take advantage of. We've obviously at BNP Paribas evaluated that and looked at different products that we can offer, different ways we can work with partners. So it's definitely created challenges, especially with the economic situation, but you've also got to look on the positive side of things and say this is something new that we haven't done before, and hopefully we can take some positives from it to move forward.
And Cameron, when did you start there?
I started in October of 2017 when I started my apprenticeship. So I've completed the level 2 and level 3 in the customer services NVQ at BMET, which is a great thing to get me started within the industry. And from there, I've just gone from stride to stride to try and get a career sorted.
So you've been working there, and I think based over in Solihull, I believe. So you've had that experience of being in the office, and as you say, all of those interactions which are so important. And then, like the rest of the world, kind of adapting in March and working from home. I mean, has that, sort of from your personal perspective, I mean, have you really sort of missed the sort of the experiences that you pick up from your colleagues being around, and how have the company sort of tried to mitigate that, I guess, and to sort of provide the support in a virtual world?
Definitely. For myself, I thrive off energy in social situations. I really enjoy just being able to communicate with people, just having a little bit of a chit chat wherever you can, keep the day light and enjoying the day. But we've utilised like Teams, try and get a meeting every other day, just try and catch up with everyone, make sure everyone's okay, and just throughout the day, just communicating in that manner to make sure that we are still interacting with each other and not losing all of our human skills, should we say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really, really important. So I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask, and then, but thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's a great mix and range of points on your educational journey there. So hopefully for those who are listening, some sort of real food for thought. But the panelists are open to answering any questions. So you now know a little bit about them. And if anyone is watching and wants to sort of pose some particular questions and to hear what our panel have to say, then please do drop them in the chat, and I will endeavour to get through as many as we possibly can before we run out of time. But one thing I just wanted to, and I'll throw it open to any or all of you really, but I mean, with the pandemic hitting, I mean, how certain do you feel about your futures? How much has it made you reflect on plans that you had, you know, in January or February, and like we all sort of like to map things out, don't we? I think we control so much, and how much has that impacted you, or kind of created that sense of stress or worry, and you sort of thinking, you know what, I was planning to do this, but now I just don't know, because I don't know what the future's going to hold for me. Does anybody want to go first?
I don't mind going.
Go on then, Gwen.
I think for me personally, it's a bit of a funny one really, because the hardest part of my learning experience at the moment is finding work experience. Like, I am grateful for companies such as Linklaters, Clifford Chance and White and Case, who have done, they are legal firms who have done online versions of their work experience, which again, I am also grateful for, because you kind of get a feel of what it's like to be working in there, which I guess differs from anyone else on the panel who may possibly have done more like hands-on things, and it might be more difficult to find work experience. But I think it's difficult when it comes to getting a feel of how it is to be working in that sort of environment, because you never know. I personally have never done any type of office work, so the fact that I can't do that at the moment because of COVID, it's a bit of a thing for me where I'm like, I don't know if that's the kind of environment that I would thrive in, or that I would personally be like to be involved in.
Yeah, normally I suppose that's part of work experience, isn't it? That you're assessing, hang on, this is not what I thought, and it's a great time to learn those lessons, so you can sort of switch or adapt potentially. And
yeah,
I mean, have you sort of spoken to friends or others who are on the course? Is that a sort of a common theme, Gwen? Others
it
are
is,
feeling
yeah.
as well.
So
yeah.
Again, finding work experience for us in general has been quite difficult. So like I said before, we have been turning to online versions of these work experiences, which, like I said, is effective, but you don't quite get the social aspect of it, which is, for me anyway, it's very important in terms of finding a place of work.
Yeah. But anyone else want to come in on that, or give some sort of thoughts on, you know, how the pandemic's maybe impacted your plans, be it in the sort of short term or slightly more longer term?
Am I okay to
Go on, Millie. Yes.
yeah, so like obviously
I'm kind of like new jumping into kind of the engineering side, and it's hard again with the work experience because with engineering, I feel like with the engineering I want to go into, you have got to really be in that environment to actually kind of get hands on and, you know, actually learn and do things. And with everything now being turned virtual, it is a lot harder to kind of manage and grow your skills. Where it's like if I was, let's say, actually in the, well, not office, but if I was in the right environment, like actually at the company, I was doing the experience how or whatnot, I'd probably learn just a little bit more of the practical side than just visually seeing, because obviously it's always better to actually learn and then do it yourself than just watch it and, you know, kind of just take it in. So I guess it is a little bit worrying for kind of trying to grow your future, where it's all, you know, virtual. But
and I suppose really ensuring that you know that what you're doing is what you want to be doing, because it's such a key point. You're setting off on that journey, and as I say, you know, lots of people change their minds because who knows? And it's only when you really get those experiences that you sort of confirm or that you want to do it. Or you, I mean, really, just sort of for yourself and Laura. Actually, there's a question from Clifford, which I'm just going to bring in. Certainly, in particular, sort of rail or engineering. I mean, what made you choose that sort of career or that course in the first place? Because it's reasonably specific. But then when you're sort of say stuck at home and you can't get stuck in sort of practically, it can be really tricky. But were there key sort of drivers which directed you towards engineering in the first place?
Do you want me to go first? Or
Yeah, sure, go on.
Quite a few of my family members, are in, the engineering world. I know I've always been quite hands-on when I was little. I've always enjoyed doing actual activities, making things from, like, obviously my own, creation. And I think it's just like a job or a career that I see myself, being comfortable in, growing myself, my knowledge. And I guess engineering just helps other people. It doesn't just help, one person. It's like it helps everyone, and it's just new and it's fun, and it's just something that just gets your brain going.
You make me want to go and become an engineer now. That sounds great. But but as you sort of were saying, it's so important to sort of confirm all those feelings, isn't it, with real on-the-job practical training as well. I mean, Laura, same question to you, really, that Clifford sort of posed. I mean, what made you choose your career in sort of rail?
I think for me, like, I'd joined the apprenticeship when I was 25, so I was a little bit older than a normal apprenticeship like person as such. But I'd been in the working world quite a few years, and I just wanted to kind of have a career for myself that I was secure with, that wasn't going anywhere. So when I saw the rail apprenticeship, I thought, oh, that's great. Everybody's always going to need trains. And I think it kind of goes back to the last question about sort of, are you confident like with your job, or are you like worried about the future? And for me, I'm not really as much worried compared to many other young people, because I'm in a place of like essential work. And I think that's really important for like businesses who've got any sort of essential work to maybe put forward an apprenticeship, like whether it be like food manufacturing, transport is a big one, just so like younger people have the opportunity to know that they've always got a secure job.
So that sense of security, really, really important. And while we're talking about the uncertainty that COVID's created, as you say, you're kind of feeling
a little bit more confident. I mean, obviously I'm a little bit concerned because it's a ripple effect of being like more people unemployed means like less jobs up for grabs. But all in all, I'm feeling pretty confident. But as well as really, I joined the apprenticeship because I like engineering, and I like to have a hands-on sort of job to sort of trade to my name.
Fantastic. Cameron, were you going to come in? I think earlier, I don't know, or anyone else on the panel? Just want to sort of give a thought on that sense of the future, and uncertainty or worries that this situation is posing for you?
Yeah, I think that I was just going to come in, and I think not so much for myself, but obviously for the people that are then making the exchange from education to going into a working environment. I think now's the time to offer apprenticeships to the absolute maximum we can. I think it's just going to be a great alternative to university, because I think it's going to be a little bit off-putting for some people, regarding obviously the uncertainty of everything, and being able to get a graduate job is hard in itself. So I think recovering from the pandemic, it is going to cause some challenges for some people. So I think it's the right time to push for people going into apprenticeships and show that you can get education alongside building on your skills in a working environment, and obviously not in any way detrimenting yourself financially with it. I think with everyone at the moment, because of the economic situation, it has staggered the progression of some people. But at the same time, I think it's more of an internal motivation now to try and make sure that you're still persistent and not giving up on obviously settling, should I say, just for a job, but more so just keep putting your front foot forward, and when the time comes and everyone's recovered, then something will come from this opportunity, should we say.
Brilliant attitude, Cameron. No, I love that. That absolutely resonates. And Gabriel, there's a question that's been posed just for you. So keen to get your thoughts on the future. But Hayley has asked, how are you thinking about approaching your UCAS application if you haven't done it already? I'm trying to remember now the timeframes, and sort of how are you deciding which university you might want to go to, assuming if you are going sort of down that path, due to the whole uncertainty around exam marking?
So we obviously we couldn't go to open days or anything, so we had to go to a lot of virtual open days. But I was quite snobby with how I chose my uni choices. Actually, that's a very loud chair. I looked at like the league tables and stuff, because I was lucky enough to be quite good at the A levels I chose. So I was able to look at quite like good unis. So basically I looked around, like I limited myself to like, I think it was like top 40, top 50. And then from there I just started looking at different courses, because at the time I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to, like, I liked religion and I know that I liked politics. So when I saw that I could like do both in one degree, I was like, sick, I guess I'll do that. And it's quite interesting actually with how like the future has affected everything, because like you've got places like University of Birmingham, they're offering a one lower grade plus like if you're eligible to access to Birmingham, so you can get in there a lot easier. Plus quite a few unis are I think like Kent is known as like a European university. University of Birmingham has quite a few exchange students. A lot of them are not coming anymore because of the COVID situation. So it's made it easier for people, I think, to potentially get places in those more like coveted unis. So luckily I've done my UCAS as well, because the college deadline was the 27th of November.
Right.
So we just sort of, it was good in a way, because we had like the whole summer to work on our personal statement, make choices, stuff like that. And what it was I just ordered a bunch of prospectuses. They all came, I went through them, and then I just started going through the courses until I found the ones I liked.
And so you've made your choices, and now it's about waiting and seeing.
Yeah. Do you want me to say where I applied?
Yeah, where are you hoping to go?
Yeah, I applied to Edinburgh, Leeds, Cardiff, Exeter, and Lancaster. Because I really like the Lancaster campus. Actually, that was the main reason I applied there. But I've applied now, so hopefully because Edinburgh's got my application. Hopefully, I get made an offer there. Yeah. Because I quite like Scotland.
And have you been to any of the actual universities at any point before, or were you really doing all of that digitally then?
It was all digital, yeah. I'd made plans to go to a bunch. I'd made plans to go to like King's College, London, Leeds, Cardiff, Edinburgh, all of those places, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, wasn't able to. So we had to do like digital open days, which isn't quite the same. It's like it's just not the same.
It's one of the real challenges,
But
isn't it? Because you, as you say, you can do a lot online, but that real sort of feel, the vibe, the walking the
yeah,
streets and seeing if a place just feels right. Challenge, especially when you're coming from somewhere like Birmingham, which, as we know, is pretty much the best place in the whole wide world. Right. Sorry, Susie, did you want to come in there?
Well, A, to just agree with your last statement, obviously, Paul. B, to say that hadn't even, to be honest with you, that hadn't even crossed my mind, that you can't go and tour many of the universities, and I work in education, and so that is a huge thing to try and achieve, as you say, to pick up the vibe of somewhere virtually. And I just really wanted to just pick up on a bit of the theme around work experience as well, because the team that I look after, we have a team of work experience coordinators who work with firms across the region and across our different sectors to look for work experience opportunities. And we are incredibly grateful of the innovation that a lot of our firms and partners are showing to us in terms of looking at the language. One of my colleagues who I know is on the call this morning has been using is employer-led remote work experience. But again, most of it is for obvious reasons, is virtual. We are starting to see in some sectors, some organisations now being able to look at more physical work experience. So another colleague who I can see is on the call has recently updated me that the construction giant Lend-Lease is looking at some site visits for some of our construction students over a period of time next year. But I think what's struck me just hearing everybody, and particularly sort of Gwen's comments and Cameron's comments, is I think earlier in lockdown we all talked a lot about the amazing benefits of working from home, and there are some really amazing benefits. And you know, I have a young son, and being able to balance for me a little bit of home and work a little bit better is really supportive. But I think that this again is part of that emerging conversation that's beginning to show us all that actually it is all about balance, and that particularly when you're in those early stages of your career, being able to be physically in somewhere for at least a period of time, might not need to be every day, but at least a period of time to feel, is this the right culture for me? Have I made the right career choice? But as Cameron said, to be able to learn by absorbing and develop your skill set by just being around others is vitally critical, and it's how we all learn as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of those things then.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting, of course, you know, in 2021, how things start to swing back again. Maybe not imminently, but hopefully, you know, we're seeing infection rates falling. So at some point early in the new year, I'd imagine that the tiering system will start to relax alongside the vaccination program. And so, you know, things will open up, and I think that'd be good opportunities to sort of get back into the workplace, to certainly sort of, Gabriel, make sure you're going to be all over the country from Edinburgh to Exeter, aren't you? Trying to sort of check those out before you have to make your final decisions. And there's a comment here as well from Frankie, who's just runs a mentoring program at university, and has sort of found that industry professionals really do see the value of supporting future talent, especially during these times, and are offering more and more virtual insight days now in lieu of those face-to-face opportunities. And so Frankie just recommends looking into mentoring programs as a way of gaining more experience and building networks, which I think is a great point. So Calvin in the chat as well has asked a question here, just sort of saying, does the panel believe that they received good career advice before leaving school, and were apprenticeships promoted to you? So I don't know, what does everyone think about the career advice that you've received sort of to date, and particularly around apprenticeships? Who wants to go first with that one?
I'll go, if that's all right.
Go on, Cameron.
So in terms of career advice, I've had probably a different journey to a lot of other people. I went to university to study sport and exercise science, which has complete relevance to what I do now. But I just found that it wasn't for me. That was what I was seen to be, not pushed into, but that was the direction that I was told to pursue, the university route. I know obviously now that apprenticeships will offer a university and workplace with a scheme that's obviously been emerging in the last couple of years, which I think is a great thing. I think that, like myself, I wasn't in the right, what's the way to put this? I wasn't enjoying that university experience as much as other people. Not to knock it, obviously university is completely for some people, but for others it doesn't seem to click with us very well. And then dropping out of there and then pursuing this apprenticeship through BMET, that's kind of been my first steps on the ladder, and I think that's the best thing for me that worked out. I think that obviously everyone works in a different light and different ways, so I think to be able to maybe offer apprenticeships more at the A-level college stage, just so that you know that you don't have to pursue just university. There are other options out there to get you into this industry and that. I think that would be a major thing.
No, very much so. Any other thoughts on that? Anyone want to come in?
I agree with Cameron on that one, because when I left school, it was very pushed in a way to go to university, study such and such a subject. And like you said, like some people, university is great. Like if you know what you want to do and you know what sort of avenue you want to go for in a career, then uni is a great option. But for people that are maybe not so sure about a career, it would be better to have more apprenticeship options, because obviously if you then go to uni and then decide, oh, actually I don't want to pursue this as a career, you're then left with college debt, and it makes it more difficult for young people to get on the career ladder, because they've already got that college debt and they kind of have to start again from scratch. So if there was more opportunities for apprenticeships, I think that would be really good, and even work experience as well.
Yeah. Gabriel, you had your hand up there. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the A-level bit of the college, quite a few people are going to do apprenticeships. I think luckily now times have changed slightly, so people, I feel like maybe like 10 years ago or so, as you guys said, I'm not sure how old you guys are, sorry. There was definitely like a almost taboo around like not going to university. But now luckily I think like my friend he does like the sciences, he's going to go do like a business apprenticeship. Another one wants to go do an apprenticeship in like computing or something. So luckily there are a few more avenues, I think, which is definitely a good thing. Yeah, like if I didn't know what I would want to do, I'd probably go do an apprenticeship as well. So I'm quite grateful for them.
No, and in answer to your question, Gabriel, it's too old, sadly. But I mean, one of the big differences, I mean, you know, when I went to university, but you didn't have to pay fees. And so it was a slightly different mentality, because actually, you know, you didn't have as much to lose. And if you didn't, you know, you sort of went along still not knowing what you wanted to do. But, you know, the world has changed an awful lot in those. I was still in black and white days when I was at university, I think. Just trying to take a few more questions. And Jane from BNP. So Cameron, I'm sure will work closely with Jane. Asked a question, what's one of the biggest things that you think businesses can do to help young people, you know, who are still at sort of school, you know, sort of 14 to 18 age group, who aren't sure about their next steps because they haven't been able to do some of that early work experience, which I'm sure, you know, when you were maybe sort of, you know, 15, 16, you were getting the chance to do. Is there anything that you think schools could do more closely with businesses? Again, open question to anyone who maybe sort of thinks, you know what, I wondered why we didn't do that, or I had a great experience doing this. Could we do more of it? Cameron?
I think the biggest thing that could be done is to offer work experience in various industries. When I was at school, obviously the work experience for myself was you had a week of your choice to go and experience something, which is fantastic if you obviously know 100% what you want to do. But circumstances change, you change in yourself, so do your interests. So I think it would be great if they could offer in some way, shape or form, like open days for employment, just being able to open the door to some people, maybe they haven't seen it in the same light, obviously reading up on it as to what they did when they actually experienced it in person. I think as well, maybe being able to, like an intern scheme, maybe they volunteer one day per week or something along those lines, just to try and build up a foundation of what they've acquired in a certain industry. If it does follow their interests and in hand, trying to build a pathway for them to gain qualifications, whether that be for apprenticeship or university, to develop their career aspirations.
Thanks, Cameron. Any other thoughts on that? Again, it's open floor, but we've got another great question here from Ruth, who compliment to our 5 panelists here. So it's great to hear from individuals who are focused and enthusiastic to learn and develop, which totally agree with. But Ruth's question is, she's keen to understand if you feel confident in being able to network and expand your professional networks to learn from others, which I suppose sort of links back to that some of what Cameron was saying earlier, and just, you know, how do you get used to sort of mixing and making those connections, which are maybe not structured learning, but the softer stuff that you pick up. And it links to another question just around sort of soft skills, and do you think, or what sort of soft skills do you think are going to be most important for you when you think about your career ambitions? So a couple of questions there just around networking and building connections, which are going to help expand your career opportunities going forward. And do you sort of think that you've particularly missed out over the last sort of 8 or 9 months? So I think Gwen you had your hand up there. Gwen, do you want to go first with this one?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, because I'm thinking about going into the legal career, networking is a very big part of getting your foot in the door when it comes to opportunities. And I think I personally feel like within the past year or so, I feel like I've missed out on some opportunities because of COVID, because a lot of networking opportunities tends to be you go to an event that a firm has set up for networking, or you go to an event that they have that gives you like an insight of what it's like working for their company and the kind of things that they do. And a majority of them, a lot of them have gone to do that online, setting up webinars such as this, or doing talks and things like that, which again is useful for us to get an insight.
Oh, I've just lost Gwen's sound there. Gwen, your sound, I don't know if you've just oh, you're back.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah, so it doesn't the like going online doesn't quite help with face-to-face interaction with companies and with certain individuals within those companies, which kind of hinders the networking aspect of it, really. Yeah,
so that's a real concern, that by not being able to do this now, those who may be, you know, a year ahead and are out working, even if they're still going to be somewhat hamstrung because they're, you know, not being able to work in the office, but they're building those connections to sort of a greater degree. So it may slow down future progression.
Yeah, definitely. And also kind of, I feel like it slows down the kind of development of skills when it comes to approaching people and like approaching these big individuals that have a reputation. And I feel like it takes some sort of courage, which some people may not necessarily have from online experiences. I suppose.
Need to be around them, don't you? Build, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. It's quite difficult to build a rapport, I think, with people online rather than in person. So.
And I mean, Laura and Millie, I mean, from an engineering point of view, does networking matter? I suppose it's still around building sort of professional contacts. And do you sort of think that that's been hampered right now? I mean, Laura, I mean, from your perspective, obviously, sort of, you know, working at West Midlands Trains, has that become more difficult to build those relationships?
It has hindered it in a sense, just because normally without COVID we'd be in the depot like basically Monday to Friday, but we've had a lot of going into the depot, going out of the depot, and it does hinder like making connections with people and colleagues. And also with my field, there's so much to learn in terms of like how to run a train, how a train works, that when you have 2 weeks off and then you go back, you tend to forget a lot of stuff. And if we were there every day, like it would sink in a little bit easier, I think. So yeah, it's definitely hindered it.
Millie, any thoughts from you on that? Or, I mean, I know you're at an earlier stage in your career, but does it sort of concern you, though, not having those opportunities to sort of build networks right now? And again, just some of the, be it professional development, but even just personal development opportunities, which aren't quite the same just when you're doing it over a video screen.
Yeah, going back from what everyone else has said, I definitely think, you know, someone who is starting out, I have done work experience, and I know that, you know, communication and, you know, speaking and building rapport with, you know, people you do want to potentially work with or work for in the future, it definitely does have an impact. And obviously it's hard to make an impact, you know, kind of sell yourself, I guess, to an employer when you're online. So yeah, it is a bit worrying, just for future networking, and because obviously events won't be held and you won't be able to kind of go into an office and, you know, meet people. But hopefully, you know, it will maybe ease up if lockdown does ease up. But it definitely is like a little bit of a concern, I know, for myself and probably for other young people who are just starting in, you know, any, you know, whether you're going into legal or engineering or religious studies or political. I think for any young person who is trying to, you know, jump off in their career, it is obviously worrying with networking. But
it's really good sort of feedback, certainly for businesses on the call as well, to sort of be considering in ways that they can help and support, and to tap into this talent. Because don't forget, you know, businesses, you know, want to sort of be active and recruiting the next wave of talent. And if you look in the chat, then Jason Challoner, who's actually the president of our Lichfield and Tamworth chamber, is a specialist recruiter in construction and infrastructure, and he's certainly got some work experiences he can offer. And I'm going to come to Susie to get your perspective. And Susie, sort of linking in just in general, but Michelle's also made a comment here about, could businesses in Birmingham and Solihull pledge a one-day workplace visit, maybe, to give young people a good insight on what the company does and the job roles within it, which probably would be one for when we're sort of through the pandemic and it's a little bit easier. But what's your perspective on those links between businesses and students? Obviously that's kind of right in your wheelhouse, isn't it, with employer engagement? But what do you think businesses do well? What could they be doing, or we could collectively be doing better?
Okay. What I've always said is that pre-pandemic, I think our region, and I know I'm biased because I've grown my career here, and in answer to your question, Gabriel, 41, and I don't look it, I know. But I've grown my career in the region, and I do think we are leading the way in this. And I can explain that with examples. If we take our professional services sector, a sector which is my background, we as a city region are in our third or potentially fourth year of hosting a professional services week, where normally professional services firms across the region, particularly within Birmingham city centre, in essence, picking up on some of the things that Cameron was suggesting, open their doors up and invite schools, colleges, young people to come in and have I suppose, a little bit like an open day in firms. We're the only region to do that. And you know, I've been privileged enough to sit round tables where we've had sort of government ministers come up and you know, people coming up from London to quiz us a little bit on some of this activity over the years. And they've always seemed a little bit surprised that with campaigns like that, it's based on business and education in the region coming together. It's not based on somebody forcing us to come together. And that we're doing it because we know it's the right thing to do. Why do we know it's the right thing to do? Because if we cast our mind back to 08, 09, when there was the financial crash, and we looked at some of the decisions we made there, and then we fast forward to sort of 2012, 2013, when I entered into the world of FE, we have a skills crisis that we're all trying to handle in different ways. So I think regionally, watching a lot of people across education and business come together really fills me with a sense of pride. I think what we could be doing more of, particularly at this time, is around challenging our own thoughts. So I think Cameron raised it by saying if you've got those opportunities or those job vacancies coming through in the future, just to have a step back and think, could this be an apprenticeship opportunity? And if you're unsure whether or not it could be, to talk to any of the FE colleges across our region, any of the private training providers, the universities, and just to understand, could this be an apprenticeship opportunity? Because they can be right up to a sort of a degree level apprenticeship. So I think there's that. I think it's the innovation as well around thinking to ourselves about work experience. How can we, and this is a difficult one, isn't it? Yeah. How can we deliver something that gives a real good hands-on experience in the current situation with the restrictions? It is nigh on impossible. So I think continuing to look at this virtual led is definitely a way forward for us. But again, not to take our eyes off the goal that one day, you know, that 90-year-old lady has had her vaccine this morning. One day we will be through this, and therefore what does that look like? And I think that the final thing, and I'll do a little bit of a plug for the Chamber, is when we're talking about the power of networking, and that's peer-to-peer networking and picking up our own delivery of, I don't call them soft skills anymore, it's vital skills for me. So it's communication, teamworking, confidence, all of that. And, you know, we do have in our city region Future Faces. We do have a young person's networking organisation that just last week announced its merger with BPS Birmingham as well to be an even stronger platform for young people at the start of their careers and in their earliest pre-career stage. So, you know, some creative thought to say, firms to consider looking at potential membership packages for young people as they're joining their organisations, or to even look at whether there's an opportunity to perhaps sponsor some young people through that. I think many of us in the city have been fortunate enough to drive our careers through a networking platform like Future Faces, and can't really underestimate the power that's done for our own careers. So that would be my sort of three themes there.
No, that's a great point. I mean, Future Faces, you say, and BPS Birmingham coming together, you know, does create a network which has been adapting as well, and create, you know, ensuring that what used to happen physically right now is still happening virtually, and creating those networks. Over 600 young people are involved on that. There's a number of businesses who support it. The four patrons are Mills and Reeves, so sort of, Gwen, you know, the big legal firm here in Birmingham. We've got Deutsche Bank from financial services, Aston University, and Gymshark, who, you know, if you sort of saw in the Sunday Times, are sort of consistently the fastest growing company in the UK, and pretty much taking over the world right now. So again, lots of different sectors, but businesses who are really committed to trying to work on providing those links, and sort of backs up what you said, Susie, of, you know, there's lots of good practice here. There's always more that can be done. To Michelle's point, Kobe in the chat suggested work experience tasters for people when they're sort of 14 or 15, which maybe would link into sort of apprenticeship down the line. I think it's also, you know, it's even more important right now, and so many businesses under so much pressure that it can be too easy to maybe postpone a scheme or to park thinking about this right now. And I think that's one thing that we're continually trying to champion, and working with BMed and Susie and others, know that, you know, you've got to still always be looking to your future recruitment and tapping into, you know, individuals such as those who are on the panel today, because not doing is going to put your business at a disadvantage as well. You need that constant input of new thinking, young thinking, which is how you keep driving your business forward. There's one good question here from Calvin as well, just asking if any of the panel have joined their respective industry bodies or associations, so maybe away from something like Future Faces, which is a general networking group. But has anybody so far sort of been a part of another industry group? Maybe that's more sort of Cameron or Laura, sort of for you really right now. Or I don't know if you've even had the opportunities to, or if you've sort of seen any benefit.
In rail, we've got like a union, which have been really good. Like, we have union reps at work, and it's good. I haven't joined yet, but I probably will do, because it's good to be a part of the union because you can talk to them about sort of problems, and I think they want to enhance the learning for apprentices as much as anyone else does. So we definitely have opportunities for like associations and stuff in rail.
What about sort of financial services, Cameron? Are you aware of such sort of groups and the support?
Yes, so I'm aware of them. I haven't joined any associations of yet. I'm more following them on LinkedIn and such, just trying to get some updates regarding the situation, especially with the payment holiday situation that's come out in the financial services industry.
Yeah.
We're having to follow that quite closely. We get updates quite regularly on that from the FCA and FLA. So I haven't joined anything as of yet, but I do follow them on social media to keep in touch with what's going on.
No, great. Well, look, mindful the time has absolutely flown by. We're fast approaching 10 o'clock, so we'll start to sort of wrap up now. But maybe just one final question for the panel. I mean, what would you say has been the biggest learn that you've had since the coronavirus pandemic hit? And is there anything which you've sort of experienced right now that you think, you know what, in 2021, when the world starts to return to normal, this is what I'm really going to do now? It's really, I've had that chance, you know, sat at home more than I'd like to be, that I've really decided that I'm going to do more of this, or I'm going to push on in my career in this way, or, you know, really be it find a mentor or sort of personal or professional development. The particular lessons that you sort of think resonate with you? Gwen, do you want to start us off?
I think for me personally, my biggest issue was balancing the work-home life. Especially since you're working from home, it's so difficult to find the motivation just to do anything in terms of college work and things like that while you're sat at home. You're not really like, you've got all the time in the world, or you feel like you've got all the time in the world. And it's finding that healthy balance between getting work done as well as having time to step away from that and go and do something else, which I found really difficult towards the start of the pandemic because I felt quite suffocated, because I always was like pretty much like subjected to 1 or 2 rooms of my house really. But I'm going to take with me throughout 2021 just in a way of finding different ways of keeping myself entertained as well as motivated while I'm still working from home.
Yeah. Gabriel.
I think for me, since one of the things we have to do for politics is like the baseline, which is like read the news and pay attention to that. And obviously we had a lot more time on our hands. Like me personally, I would just read the news on the train on the way to college. But so like we've had a lot more time to like look at stuff and like read stuff and see what's actually going on. And I think that sort of, it's got a lot of people uneasy and angry. And me personally, it made me want to, it sort of changed my career plans, because I was originally going to teaching. I wanted to teach like religion or politics, or like go get like a master's in like history or something. But what it's made me want to do now is probably go into like political journalism, just because I'd quite like to see what's actually going on. So for me, overall, the lockdown sort of taught me, it taught me what I wanted to really do and stuff. It gave me a lot more time, which I'm quite grateful for. Yeah.
So watch out, Laura Koonsberg then, yeah? You're coming for her job. And Gabriel, last question for you then. I mean, so Brexit, we're going to get a deal this week then as a student of
I don't think.
No,
I don't think we are. I genuinely don't know if the deal was ever in Boris Johnson's wheelhouse. He promised it, but his deal, if you look at it, it was more or less May's deal that he himself shot down. So it's like, you know, not sure. Preferably, I think we would all like a deal, you know. Yeah. A deal would be a lot better than none at all, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Let's see. We're living through history, aren't we? So the next few days, we'll see which way it goes. Certainly be lots to be studying and reporting on. Laura, Millie, Cameron, any final sort of closing sort of lessons or thoughts? Millie?
Yes. Oh, so just going off what other people have said, it has been quite, I know, stressful balancing work and home, because it practically in lockdown it's merged as one. So it's hard to, you know, focus and have the motivation to do your work and then step away and do things that, you know, you actually enjoy that do keep things balanced. But I think, yeah, when lockdown does ease off, it's just going to be a case of, you know, balancing and, you know, hopefully just being a bit more motivated to actually, you know, do things when you're at home, because it does feel like you have all the time in the world when you're here. So just balance, I guess.
Balance, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Laura?
I think if anything, like young people in general can maybe take this whole experience and turn it into a positive and make sort of become more grateful for things in the future when opportunities arise. Obviously, because we've all been through having a year basically at home, it might make people more motivated to sort of want to get on the right track.
Yeah. No, good. And Cameron, last word from the panelists for you. Yeah,
I think what Laura said was spot on. I think that obviously it's been very changing times and a bit, we have to be a bit versatile with all of it, but I think it will make a lot more resilient with a lot of people, and maybe a bit of humbling. So I think it will be the best foot forward going forward, and just making sure that take every opportunity that comes to us, not having any complacencies in any of our career aspirations.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, it's been a time like no other, and I think, you know, the whole population has learned an awful lot, but, you know, particularly for you guys, you know, finishing off your education in those early stages, thinking about your career, so much in front of you. You know, you know, let's hope that we're not in this situation again for the rest of certainly sort of your working lives, or even beyond. But, you know, these are, it's, you know, clear that lessons have been learned, and that all I can say is that's going to absolutely stand you in good stead going forward. Susie, just to, you know, sort of final thoughts from yourself, and what you've heard today, and what you've sort of maybe picked up as some key takeaways.
I think my final thought is, let's cast our mind back to that presentation. Let's cast our mind back to those headlines that I shared. And now let's reflect on what we've heard from the young people in our panel today. What I'd like to now hear is to start to see some headlines that reflect a huge set of behaviours demonstrated by so many young people across our region, which has been summarised beautifully by my colleagues today. You know, the level of resilience, the social responsibility, the determination, the motivation that these individuals show. And it would be nice to start to see, I think, some more positive headlines reflecting the behaviours of young people across our region.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly concur with that, and some respect, really, you know, and you know, what I'd really, my final sort of thoughts are to thank everyone, obviously to thank BMET, and to thank Susie, who's a brilliant collaborator. We've worked together for many years now, and absolutely epitomises that spirit of collaboration that she touched on here in the region. And it's about finding those bridges between, you know, education and employment and businesses, and nobody does it better than Susie. But, you know, also, you know, in particular to the panel, you know, Laura, Gabriel, Cameron, Millie, you know, Gwen, you've been inspirational this morning, you know, incredibly articulate, and you know, filling me full of optimism. You know, you've got a great take on what we've been going through, what you've been going through, but, you know, that sense of resilience, that sense of humility, that sense of tenacity, and I think, you know, sort of for those of us, to Gabriel's point, who are maybe you know, a couple of decades older, it gives you a real strong sense that the future's bright, and what we've now got to collectively do is make sure we push on with that. And as Susie just sort of alluded to, ensure that those who are running businesses and are looking to sort of make decisions on the future realise that we've got an absolutely brilliant pool of talent here to help drive our businesses and our economy forward. You know, the presentation said Birmingham's the youngest city in Europe, so therefore we've got more people just like you, and so what we've got to do is make sure we're tapping into that effectively, and no, that's how we're going to have a bright future. So with that, it's 10 o'clock. I promise I'll get us done by then. So thank you once again to the panelists. Thanks to Susie and BMET. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and watching, and let's keep that conversation going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.